All right. Now, do we have Elliott Hughes here as yet? Elliott, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So you're representing Generation Zero. Welcome to the table. Thanks for taking the time to come and talk with us this morning. Or this afternoon, as it is now, actually. Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Yes, I am here on behalf of Generation Zero, and at Generation Zero we recognise that these are exceptional times for local governments and that some adjustments need to be made and spending will need to be reduced. However, we do not think that the current balance has been struck correctly between where those cuts are being distributed. Specifically, we think the current plan is not equitable and is not in line with the City Council's declaration of a climate emergency, which occurred last year. Climate change is a real and urgent threat to Christchurch, to our livelihoods, to our health, to our homes, if you live where sea level rise could affect you, and I simply don't see that urgency in the City Council's annual plan. Fundamentally, climate change was dismissed as a footnote, and that's incredibly disappointing. I also think that the current balance between active transport and roading, where we see 77% cuts on investment in active transport but only 16% on roading, is incredibly disappointing. If we are serious about tackling emissions, that means we need to create a low carbon transport network. And right now, we seem to be prioritising the status quo over that. And more specifically, even setting aside the issue of climate change, this is incredibly disheartening for me personally, because I'm a student and like many of my peers, we use public and active transport around Christchurch. So when we see our needs being deprioritised by the council in favour of roading, that's incredibly disappointing and doesn't seem to recognise our voice as important. So we're really disappointed by that, but we think there are positive steps that can be taken. We want the council not just to consider whether they've got the balance between active and transport and roading or public transport and roading right, but also to consider what kind of low-cost measures they can take to support a transition to a low-carbon economy. And that's particularly important during this annual plan, but also moving forward as we move towards the long-term plan, that what steps can be taken within the regulatory framework, or even what steps can be taken to adjust the balance of how revenue is earned in a way that reflects the social cost of emissions. For example, maybe tinkering with parking plans or with development contributions, where changes could be made in the revenue structure and the regulatory framework that incentivise people to create the kind of Christchurch we want to see, one that's thriving and sustainable, rather than entrenching a status quo. Because ultimately, if we continue to entrench the status quo, that will not last. Climate change will change how we live, and we can be ready for that, we can work with that, or we can try and go back to a Christchurch that already wasn't sustainable even before the pandemic. So I really strongly urge the council to consider what steps can be taken to create a better future, not just a return to the status quo. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Tim.
Yeah, thank you. Is Generation Zero going to be the leaders in our seats in the future? When we open up and develop or look at developing land, whether it's irrelevant of the council, the local authority, whether it's in the Environment Council or a county council or a city council, it seems that one of the things that isn't involved in it is a comprehensive public transport system or plan. There's nothing in anywhere that's really required to prove that there's that comprehensive public transport plan. Do you think that that is a key element to opening up any land for development, irrelevant where it is?
I think it's certainly true that we support making sure that the social costs of new development is considered, and that includes if we need to build new public transport links to service this area, then that should be reflected in how we consider that application and what kind of contributions we might ask from the developer.
So you're saying that it wouldn't have to be a requirement, it's just that it would be a preference?
I think I would say that part of, we are not experts, so exactly how you frame that, I'm not sure, but we should definitely be considering that, and there should either be costs if there isn't one, or as you say, a requirement.
Thank you very much.
James.
Okay. Kia ora, Elliott. Look, you said that you questioned whether your voice is important. It's fantastic that you're here and also your presence. And as Tim has just alluded to, you're the generation that's going to take advantage of the things that we're putting in place now and the debt we're leaving for you. But it is really important that you're here, that you're articulate, you're energised, and what we need is more of you and your generation around the table, because in time, as Tim says, you're going to be on this side of the table. So I encourage you to come back with more of your party, if you like, or your group, and present to us. It's really interesting, and it gives me confidence. I'm happy.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are running slightly ahead, so I'll take another couple of very quick questions, one from Yanni, one from Aaron.
Oh yeah,
Yanni.
Thank you for the deputation. I just wanted to check in terms of public transport, is there 2 or 3 things that you think we should be doing right away that would make a difference to show that we were taking it seriously as a priority?
Yes, in public and active transport, I think number one thing you could do is look at all the projects that are being deferred and say, are there some low-cost projects that we can keep? Some things are very expensive, some things are not. So, for example, putting covered bus shelters in place is not. So I think really identifying which projects are the lowest cost that we can save a couple of would be a really good sign that you're committed to making public transport an integral part of our transport network.
Thank you. And finally, Aaron.
Yeah, so mine was a PT question as well. So the numbers seem to keep falling. I think pre-COVID we're at 2.5%, whereas pre-quake we were at 4%. We've spent tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars on PT in that time, mostly in one facility, which I think is pretty awesome. But why are the numbers, in Gen Zero's opinion, why are those numbers keep dropping when we're putting more and more infrastructure in, bus lanes? Do you know?
I think my inclination would be to say, while we are putting more money in, I don't think we're at the scale we need, because if you look at Auckland, which has invested more money than Christchurch, Auckland's public transport numbers keep rising. So I think that's very suggestive that if you create a world-class network, then people will come. I don't think Christchurch could be described as a world-class network at this point.
Oh, well, a lot of visitors do rate it. I know people from other cities around New Zealand that think Christchurch does have a really good service. And but that aside, is there key things that you believe should be being done that will get more people on buses? Because, I mean, the density of population is a really big one. That it's really hard for us. Well, there's no city in the world with our density of population with a successful PT system. It just mathematically can't work. So what will get those people on there?
Well, I think to counter that slightly, what I would say is the City Council's current scheme in town seems to be to incentivise commuters to come in and park all day, and I don't think that's a particularly good use of our car parks. I think that locks them up and means that businesses in the central city find it harder to bring customers in. So I think if you might change the way you look at parking to make it so commuters were incentivised to use public transport to get into town, and then that would make space for businesses and it would make things better for the environment as well. So I think that's a real double win that could be made quite easily.
And one final question from Sarah.
Would it be fair to say that, because you mentioned the tinkering, that what you're asking for is transformation rather than tinkering, and to do it quickly?
We would absolutely like to see transformation, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks very much indeed for your submission, and thanks for your answers to questions as well. It was great. Thanks for joining us. So, Lee.